The sound came first. A sharp, broken sob, raw, uncontrollable, cut through the sterile hum of the hospital lobby. Heads turned, phones lifted, and in the center of it all stood a young black woman, her hands trembling as she clutched the edge of the nurse's station like it was the only thing keeping her upright. "Please," she whispered again, her voice cracking. "I'm begging you, my sister can't breathe, she needs help now." The nurse didn't even look up at first. She clicked her pen slowly, deliberately, then sighed as if the woman in front of her were nothing more than an inconvenience. "I already told you," the nurse said loudly, her tone sharp enough to slice the air. "You need insurance or a deposit. This is a hospital, not a charity." The young woman shook her head desperately. Tears streamed down her face, soaking into the thin fabric of her worn hoodie. "I don't have the money yet," she said. "But she's turning blue. She's only 17. Please, just look at her." The nurse finally looked up. And when she did, her expression hardened. Her eyes flicked over the girl's scuffed shoes, her frayed sleeves, her trembling hands. Then her lips curled into something cruel. "You people always say that," the nurse snapped, raising her voice so the entire lobby could hear. "Always crying, always dramatic, always trying to get something for free." A gasp rippled through the crowd. The girl froze, her sob caught in her throat like it had been strangled. I'm not trying to get anything," she stammered. "I just want my sister to live," the nurse scoffed. "Then maybe you should have thought about that before coming here with nothing," she said. "This isn't my problem." The words landed like a slap. Around them, the hospital lobby buzzed with life, doctors walking briskly, patients checking in, families whispering, but no one stepped forward. Some people looked away, some whispered behind their hands. Others openly raised their phones, recording every second as if this young woman's pain were nothing more than entertainment. The girl felt it all. The heat of humiliation burned through her chest. Her knees buckled slightly and she caught herself on the counter, her knuckles white. "Please," she whispered again, barely audible now. "I'll do anything." The nurse leaned back in her chair, arms crossed. "Crying won't change the rules," she said coldly. "If you can't pay, step aside. You're holding up the line." A man behind the girl cleared his throat impatiently. "Some of us have real emergencies," he muttered. That was when the girl broke. A sound escaped her that wasn't even a cry anymore. It was grief, terror, and helplessness colliding all at once. "My sister is dying," she said, her voice shaking so badly it barely sounded like her own. "She's in that chair. She can't breathe. She's scared. I'm all she has." She turned slightly, pointing toward the wheelchair near the wall. In it sat a frail teenage girl, her skin pale, lips tinged with blue, chest rising in shallow, panicked gasps. Her eyes fluttered weakly as she tried and failed to catch a full breath. The crowd saw her, and still no one moved. The nurse glanced over for half a second, then rolled her eyes. "She looks fine to me," she said. "Probably just anxiety. Happens all the time." The words were poison. The young woman spun back around, disbelief flooding her face. "Fine," she cried. "She can't breathe." The nurse stood up now, and when she did, her voice rose even higher, sharp, commanding, humiliating. "Lower your voice," she snapped. "You're causing a scene." A scene. The girl looked around and realized something devastating. To them, she was the problem, not the sister gasping for air, not the cruelty, not the indifference. Her cheeks burned as more phones came out. Someone whispered, "This is crazy." Another murmured, "Why doesn't she just leave?" Her hands fell to her sides, her shoulders slumped. And for one heartbreaking second, she truly believed she had lost. But then, from the far end of the lobby, a figure stopped walking. A tall, well-dressed man, silver hair, calm posture, eyes sharp with intelligence, had been passing through the crowd when he heard the nurse's voice. He slowly turned, and his gaze locked onto the young woman, then shifted to the wheelchair, then back to the nurse. Something dark flashed across his face. He took one step forward, then another. The nurse hadn't noticed him yet. But something was about to change. Before we go any further, let me ask you this question of the day. Have you ever seen someone judged, dismissed, or humiliated simply because of how they looked or how much money they had? Do you think people would have reacted differently if this young woman looked wealthy? Tell us what you think in the comments, and let us know where you're watching from today. Because what this nurse doesn't know, what no one in this lobby knows yet, is that the man now standing behind them, the man quietly watching every second of this, is the very reason this hospital even exists. And in just a moment, the truth is going to come out. But to understand how we got here, to understand who this young woman really is, let's go back to how this story truly began this morning. The morning had begun long before the sun rose. A soft alarm buzzed from a cracked phone screen at 4:47 a.m., vibrating against a wooden crate that served as a nightstand. The sound echoed faintly through a one-room apartment where the walls were thin, the paint chipped, and the air always carried the faint smell of damp concrete. Aaliyah Johnson opened her eyes slowly. She was 24 years old, but exhaustion had carved years into her face that no calendar ever could. Her first instinct wasn't to stretch or sigh, it was to listen. She held her breath. From the corner of the room came the uneven sound she feared most. Wheeze, pause, shallow inhale, wheeze again. Aaliyah sat up instantly. "Keisha," she whispered. Her younger sister lay curled on a narrow mattress near the window, her chest rising and falling too quickly, too shallowly. An inhaler rested loosely in her hand, empty. Aaliyah's heart clenched. "I'm here," she said softly as she crossed the cold floor barefoot. "I'm right here." She knelt beside her sister, brushing damp curls away from Keisha's forehead. The girl's skin was warm, too warm, and her lips trembled as she tried to speak. "Ali, it hurts," Keisha whispered. "I can't get air." "I know," Aaliyah said, forcing calm into her voice even as panic screamed inside her. "I know, baby, just breathe with me, okay?" She demonstrated slow breaths, even though her own lungs felt tight. Keisha was 17, bright, gentle. The kind of girl who apologized when other people bumped into her. She dreamed of becoming a physical therapist one day, wanted to help people learn how to walk again. She used to run track before asthma took that from her, before poverty took the rest. Aaliyah pressed her forehead gently against Keisha's. "I'll fix this," she whispered. "I promise." She stood and moved quietly through the room, careful not to wake their mother, who slept sitting up on the couch. Her body weakened by years of untreated diabetes and chronic pain from a factory job that had replaced her with a machine. Aaliyah opened a plastic container on the counter. Inside were coins, pennies, nickels, a few dimes. She counted them twice, still not enough. Her paycheck from the diner wouldn't come for 3 more days. The free clinic had already turned them away last week. The pharmacy wouldn't refill Keisha's medication without payment up front. Every door had closed. Still, Aaliyah washed her face at the sink, staring at her reflection. Dark brown eyes, high cheekbones, tired but unbroken. Her father used to tell her, dignity is something no one can take unless you give it away. He'd been gone 6 years now. Aaliyah pulled on her hoodie, the same one she wore almost every day, not because she didn't care how she looked, but because it was the warmest thing she owned. She slipped her feet into worn sneakers and gently shook her mother awake. "Ma," she whispered, "Keisha's asthma is bad. I'm taking her to the hospital." Her mother's eyes filled with fear instantly. "Do we have the money?" she asked. Aaliyah hesitated, then shook her head. Her mother closed her eyes, pain etched deep into her face. "Be strong," she said softly. "God sees you." Aaliyah nodded, though her throat tightened. She wheeled Keisha outside just as the sky began to lighten, a pale gray struggling toward blue. Their neighborhood was already alive with sound. Buses groaning, sirens in the distance, people rushing to jobs that barely paid enough to survive. As they waited for the bus, Keisha shivered. Aaliyah draped her own hoodie over her sister's shoulders without hesitation, even though the morning air bit at her skin. "You're gonna be okay," she said gently. "I won't let anything happen to you." The hospital loomed ahead like a fortress of glass and steel, massive, clean, intimidating. It was known across the city as one of the best. But Aaliyah knew something else too. Places like this weren't built for people like her. Still, she pushed forward. Inside, the lobby smelled of antiseptic and coffee. Everything gleamed, everything felt expensive. She approached the nurse's station with quiet respect, her voice soft, careful. "Hi," she said. "My sister is having a severe asthma attack. She needs help." The nurse barely glanced up. "Insurance?" she asked flatly. Aaliyah swallowed. "No, ma'am." "But she's really struggling to breathe." The nurse sighed. "That desk is for scheduled patients," she said. "Emergency intake is over there." Aaliyah followed directions, then another, then another. Each step came with another question she couldn't answer the right way. Insurance, deposit, payment method, each no made the air feel heavier. Keisha's breathing worsened. That was when Aaliyah's composure finally cracked. That was when her voice began to shake. That was when the nurse dismissed her cry. And that was how the quiet strength Aaliyah had carried her entire life was pushed to its breaking point. She didn't come to the hospital to beg. She came to save her sister, and she never imagined that asking for help would turn into public humiliation. By the time the automatic doors slid shut behind them, Aaliyah knew something was terribly wrong. Keisha's breathing had changed. It was no longer fast, it was weak. Each breath came with a soft, whistling rasp, like air forcing its way through a door that was barely open. Her head lolled slightly against the side of the wheelchair, curls clinging to her damp cheeks. Aaliyah crouched in front of her instantly. Keisha, she said, trying to keep her voice steady. Look at me, stay with me. Keisha's eyelids fluttered. I'm tired, Ali, she murmured. I tried to breathe right. Panic slammed into Aaliyah's chest so hard it stole her breath. No, no, she whispered fiercely. You're not going to sleep, not yet. Talk to me. What's my favorite color? Keisha's lips twitched faintly. Purple, she said. Aaliyah let out a shaky breath of relief. That's right, she said. You're doing great. Just stay awake. She stood and hurried back to the intake desk for the third time. Excuse me, she said, her voice trembling now. Please, my sister's asthma is getting worse. She needs oxygen. She needs a doctor. The clerk barely looked up. You need to wait your turn, she said, tapping her keyboard. There are people ahead of you. Aaliyah glanced around the waiting area. People sat scrolling on phones. A man laughed quietly at a video. A woman sipped coffee. None of them were gasping for air. My sister can't breathe, Aaliyah said again, louder this time. This is an emergency. The clerk's jaw tightened. Ma'am, she said curtly, if you keep raising your voice, I'll have security escort you out. The words hit like a threat. Aaliyah felt her knees go weak. Escort you out. She backed away slowly, heart pounding, and returned to Keisha. Keisha's chest barely rose now. Her fingers twitched. Aaliyah pulled out her phone with shaking hands and called the pharmacy again. This is Aaliyah Johnson, she said breathlessly when someone answered. I called earlier about my sister's inhaler. Please, can you override it? She's in the hospital lobby. She can't breathe. I'm sorry, the voice replied. Without payment, there's nothing we can do. The line went dead. Aaliyah stared at the screen. She tried another number, the free clinic. Voicemail, a charity hotline, long wait time. She looked down at Keisha, whose lips were now noticeably blue, her vision blurred with tears. This wasn't happening. She'd done everything right. She worked double shifts. She skipped meals so Keisha could eat. She walked miles when bus fare ran out. She never complained, never caused trouble, and still this. Please, Aaliyah whispered, not sure who she was talking to anymore. Please don't take her. She rushed back to the nurse's station, desperation stripping away her fear. My sister is losing oxygen, she said, her voice breaking completely now. She's turning blue. I'm begging you, just let a doctor see her. I'll sign anything. I'll work it off, please. That was when the nurse finally stood up, and that was when the situation turned cruel. You need to calm down, the nurse said sharply. You're upsetting other patients. Aaliyah gestured wildly toward the wheelchair. She's 17, she cried. She's having an asthma attack. Look at her. The nurse glanced over briefly, then shook her head. People exaggerate all the time, she said. Especially when they don't want to pay. The word especially hung heavy in the air. Aaliyah felt eyes on her now, judging, measuring, deciding her worth. I'm not lying, she said, tears streaming freely now. I would never lie about this. The nurse folded her arms. Then step aside and wait, she said, or leave. Leave. The word echoed in Aaliyah's mind like a death sentence. If she left, Keisha might not survive the bus ride home. If she stayed, she was being ignored. There was nowhere left to go. Her hands shook as she returned to Keisha and knelt beside her again. Ali, Keisha whispered weakly. I'm scared. That did it. Something inside Aaliyah cracked open. I know, she said, choking on the words. I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. She stood again, this time not careful, not polite, not quiet. My sister is dying, she cried out. Somebody help us. The lobby fell silent. All eyes turned. Phones came out. Whispers rippled like waves. That was the moment the nurse snapped. That was the moment humiliation replaced indifference. And that was when Aaliyah realized the truth she had been trying not to face all morning. She could lose her sister today, not because the hospital lacked doctors, not because medicine didn't exist, but because compassion had limits, and she didn't fit within them, with no money, no power, no voice anyone wanted to hear. Still, she made her decision. If begging was all she had left, then she would beg, no matter the cost. The bus ride felt longer than it ever had. Aaliyah sat rigid in her seat, one arm wrapped protectively around Keisha, the other gripping the cold metal rail as the city blurred past the fogged windows. Every bump in the road sent a jolt of fear through her chest, as if each one might steal another breath from her sister. Keisha's head rested against her shoulder now, too still. Stay with me, Aaliyah whispered over and over, rocking her gently. Please stay with me. Around them, the bus was half full, people in work uniforms, students with headphones, a mother bouncing a sleepy toddler on her knee. No one spoke. No one asked if they were okay. Aaliyah didn't expect them to. She had learned early that survival often meant invisibility. As the bus neared the hospital district, towering buildings of glass and steel rose above the streets like monuments to a world she had never been allowed into. The hospital itself stood at the center, massive, spotless, intimidating. Its name gleamed in silver letters across the entrance, a name Aaliyah had seen on billboards and commercials promising care, excellence, compassion. She clung to that word now, compassion. The bus hissed to a stop. Aaliyah struggled off, nearly carrying Keisha as she maneuvered the wheelchair down the ramp. Cold air bit at her face. Her legs trembled, not from weakness but from fear barely contained. Each step toward the hospital doors felt heavier than the last. What if they turned her away? What if they judged her? What if she had waited too long? She replayed every moment of the morning in her head, every missed chance, every delay, every second she hadn't acted faster. "This is my fault," a cruel voice whispered inside her. She pushed it down. The automatic doors slid open with a soft hiss. Instantly, the scent of antiseptic filled her lungs. The lobby was bright, polished, echoing with footsteps and murmured conversations. It felt like stepping into another world, one ruled by rules she didn't understand and money she didn't have. She straightened her back instinctively. She smoothed her hoodie. She wiped her face quickly, as if that might make her more acceptable. "Be calm," she told herself. "Be polite. Don't give them a reason." As she approached the intake area, she noticed the difference immediately. Well-dressed families sat comfortably. A man in a tailored suit spoke quietly into his phone. A woman in heels laughed softly with a nurse. Everyone else seemed to belong. Aaliyah felt every stare. She felt the weight of her worn shoes against the polished floor, the faint fraying at her sleeves, the way her voice trembled when she finally spoke. "Hi," she said softly. "My sister needs help. She's having trouble breathing." The nurse glanced up, eyes flicking over her in a practice sweep. "Insurance card?" she asked. Aaliyah swallowed. "No, ma'am," she said, "but it's an emergency." The nurse's smile faded instantly. Aaliyah felt something sink in her chest. She followed instructions from desk to desk, counter to counter, her hope thinning with every step. Each direction sent her farther from help and deeper into fear. As minutes passed, Keisha's breathing worsened. Aaliyah's heart pounded louder than the noise of the lobby. This place was supposed to save lives. So why did it feel like a wall? She finally reached the nurse's station, the same one she had approached again and again. She stopped. Her hand hovered over the counter. Her chest rose sharply as she drew in a breath. This was it. She could turn back now, take Keisha home, pray, or she could step forward, risk the stares, the judgment, the humiliation. She looked down at her sister. Keisha's eyes were half closed, her breathing shallow, her lips pale. Fear wrapped itself around Aaliyah's heart, but beneath it something else stirred. Hope, small, fragile, but stubborn. She squared her shoulders, lifted her chin, and stepped forward. The nurse noticed her immediately this time. Her eyes narrowed as Aaliyah approached the counter again, pushing the wheelchair with hands that trembled despite her effort to stay composed. "I told you to wait," the nurse said before Aaliyah could even speak. Aaliyah swallowed hard. "Ma'am, please," she said quietly. "My sister's condition is getting worse. She's struggling to breathe. I just need someone to look at her." The nurse's lips pressed into a thin line. "Do you have insurance now?" she asked. "No," Aaliyah replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "But this is an emergency." The nurse exhaled sharply and leaned back in her chair, crossing her arms. "Then you need to stop coming up here," she said loudly. "You're disrupting the lobby." The word loudly mattered. Heads turned. Conversations paused. Aaliyah felt the room shift, felt eyes land on her like weight. "I'm not trying to disrupt anything," she said quickly. "I just want help, please." The nurse stood up, and when she did, her voice rose, clear, sharp, and deliberately humiliating. "You people always think rules don't apply to you," she said. "This hospital has procedures. We don't just treat whoever walks in demanding free care." Aaliyah flinched. The words hit her like stones. "I'm not demanding," she said, tears forming despite her fight to hold them back. "I'm asking. My sister is sick." "Everyone's sick," the nurse snapped. "That doesn't mean we can ignore payment." Aaliyah gestured toward Keisha. "She's turning blue," she said. "Please just look at her." The nurse glanced over for barely a second, then scoffed. "She's breathing," she said dismissively. "I've seen worse." A murmur rippled through the waiting area. A woman near the chairs leaned toward her friend and whispered something, eyes fixed on Aaliyah. A man shook his head slowly. Aaliyah felt her cheeks burn. "She's only 17, Aaliyah said, her voice breaking now. "She has asthma, her inhaler is empty, she needs oxygen." The nurse raised an eyebrow. "Maybe if you had managed things better, you wouldn't be in this situation," she said coolly. The cruelty was surgical, precise. Aaliyah's mouth opened, but no words came out. A man standing nearby scoffed. "Hospitals aren't shelters," he muttered. Another voice chimed in. "Why do they always wait until it's an emergency?" The comments stacked on top of each other, crushing her. Aaliyah looked around, desperate. "Please," she said to no one in particular. Does anyone see what's happening? No one answered. Phones came out instead. Red recording lights blinked. Aaliyah felt smaller with every second. I'll sign a payment plan, she said to the nurse, her voice trembling. I'll work overtime. I'll do whatever it takes. The nurse laughed softly. That's not how this works, she said. This isn't some corner clinic. Aaliyah clenched her fists. My sister could die, she said. The nurse's face hardened. Lower your voice, she snapped. You're causing a scene. Aaliyah laughed weakly through tears. A scene, she echoed. She can't breathe. Security glanced over from the far side of the lobby. The nurse gestured subtly in their direction. If you keep this up, she said quietly now, leaning in, I'll have you escorted out. The threat landed heavy. Aaliyah's legs felt unsteady, escorted out of a hospital with her sister barely breathing. She looked down at Keisha, whose head had slumped to the side, chest barely moving. Fear surged like fire. No, Aaliyah whispered. Please don't do this. The nurse straightened and raised her voice again. Step aside, she ordered. You're holding up people who actually belong here. The word belong cut deepest. Aaliyah felt the entire lobby watching, judging, deciding. She opened her mouth to speak again, but her voice failed her. The silence stretched, heavy, unforgiving. That was when Keisha coughed weakly, a dry, frightening sound that drew a few uneasy glances. Aaliyah dropped to her knees beside the wheelchair. Keisha, she whispered frantically. Stay with me, please, the nurse sighed dramatically. This is exactly what I mean, she said. Drama. Something inside Aaliyah shattered. She looked up, tears streaming freely now. She's not drama, she said hoarsely. She's my sister. The nurse looked away, as if Aaliyah didn't exist, as if Keisha didn't matter. And in that moment, surrounded by people, cameras, and cold indifference, Aaliyah had never felt more alone. The silence that followed was unbearable, not the quiet of peace, but the heavy, suffocating kind that presses down on your chest until breathing feels like work. Aaliyah remained on her knees beside the wheelchair, one hand clutching Keisha's limp fingers, the other pressed against her sister's chest as if she could will her lungs to open by force alone. Please, Aaliyah whispered, please breathe. Keisha's eyes fluttered open for a moment. Ali, she murmured faintly. I'm here, Aaliyah said instantly, leaning closer. I'm right here. But her voice cracked halfway through the sentence. She looked up again, slowly this time, scanning the lobby. Doctors walked past. Nurses passed by with clipboards. Patients sat watching. No one stopped. No one said a word. The nurse at the station busied herself with paperwork, deliberately avoiding eye contact, as if ignoring Aaliyah long enough might make her disappear. Aaliyah felt something break inside her chest, not loudly, not dramatically, but quietly, like a thread snapping under too much strain. She stood shakily, wiping her face with the back of her sleeve. I'm sorry, she said softly. The words surprised even her. I'm sorry for causing trouble, she added, her voice trembling. I didn't mean to be loud, I didn't mean to upset anyone. She wasn't sure who she was apologizing to anymore. The nurse glanced up briefly. Then leave, she said flatly. You're disturbing the environment. Aaliyah nodded. Of course, she nodded. Her shoulders sagged as if the weight of the entire world had settled there. I'll go, she whispered. I'll just take her somewhere else. Somewhere else, as if there was somewhere else. She turned back to the wheelchair and wrapped both hands around the handles. Her grip slipped. Her hands were shaking too badly. She tried again. Nothing. Tears blurred her vision completely now. I'm sorry, she whispered again, this time to Keisha. I tried. I really tried. Keisha didn't respond. Her head slumped forward slightly. That's when panic exploded. Keisha, Aaliyah said sharply. No, look at me. Open your eyes. She shook her sister gently, too afraid. A sharp gasp tore from Aaliyah's throat. Somebody please, she cried, her voice breaking open in the quiet lobby. Please help us. The sound echoed, then vanished. A man near the chairs shifted uncomfortably and looked away. A woman lowered her phone. Security glanced over but didn't move. The nurse sighed loudly as if inconvenienced by the noise. I warned you, she said. You're making this worse. Worse. Aaliyah felt dizzy. Her legs buckled and she collapsed back to the floor, clutching Keisha's hand with both of hers. I don't understand, she sobbed. What did we do wrong? Her words came out broken, uneven, like pieces of a shattered mirror. We didn't steal, we didn't lie, we just need help. She pressed her forehead against Keisha's arm, her shoulders shaking violently now. I should have found another way, she whispered. I should have worked more, I should have. Her voice dissolved into sobs. No one interrupted, no one knelt beside her. No one said, it's going to be okay. The silence screamed louder than any insult ever could. In that moment, Aaliyah truly believed she had failed her sister, failed her mother, failed the promise she made that morning to fix this. She looked up one last time, eyes swollen, searching for any sign of mercy. The nurse met her gaze briefly, then looked away again, dismissed. Invisible. Aaliyah nodded slowly as if accepting a verdict. He rose unsteadily and whispered, "Okay." Just one word, but it carried surrender. She reached for the wheelchair again. That was when a calm voice cut through the stillness. "Stop!" It wasn't loud, it wasn't angry, but it carried weight, enough weight to freeze the room. Aaliyah turned, confused. So did the nurse, so did everyone else. A tall man stood a few feet away, his expression unreadable, his eyes fixed not on the nurse but on Keisha. Something in his gaze changed. Concern, recognition, resolve. He stepped closer, slowly, deliberately, and for the first time since walking into that hospital, Aaliyah felt something stir again inside her chest. Not hope yet, but the faintest sense that the silence was about to break. The man stepped forward again, not quickly, not dramatically, just one measured step, enough to place himself between Aaliyah and the nurse's station. "Stop," he repeated, his voice steady, calm, unmistakably authoritative. The nurse frowned. "Sir, this doesn't concern you," she said sharply. "Please step back." The man didn't even look at her at first. His eyes remained on Keisha. He crouched slightly, just enough to meet the young girl at eye level. His expression softened, gone was the sharp edge, replaced by something gentler, deeply human. "Can you hear me?" he asked Keisha quietly. Keisha's eyelids fluttered, barely. Aaliyah's breath caught. "Yes," the man said, nodding to himself. "You're very brave." He turned to Aaliyah then. Up close she noticed his calm presence, tailored suit, silver hair, posture straight but not arrogant. His eyes held no judgment, only concern. "What's her name?" he asked. "Keisha," Aaliyah replied hoarsely. "She's my sister." "She has asthma?" he asked. "Yes," Aaliyah said quickly. "Severe, her inhaler's empty, she needs oxygen." The man stood, and finally, slowly, he turned to face the nurse. "She needs immediate medical attention," he said. The nurse scoffed. "Sir, you don't understand how this works." "I understand exactly how this works," he replied evenly. "And right now a patient is in respiratory distress." The nurse's jaw tightened. "We have procedures," she said, "and unless you're paying for her care, that's enough," the man interrupted. The word landed heavy. The nurse blinked, clearly not used to being cut off. "Excuse me," she snapped. "I said that's enough," he repeated, his tone still calm but unyielding now. "This young woman asked for help. She was dismissed, mocked, threatened, and now her sister is deteriorating in front of all of us." A murmur rippled through the lobby, phones lowered slightly. Aaliyah felt her heart pounding, but something else too, relief just a little. "Sir," the nurse said stiffly, "if you don't move away from the desk, I'll call security." The man's lips curved, not into a smile, but something close to disappointment. "Go ahead," he said simply. The nurse hesitated. Security glanced over, but didn't move. Aaliyah stared at the man in disbelief. "Please," she whispered to him, "I don't want you to get in trouble because of us." He turned back to her. "You're not the one causing trouble," he said gently. "You're the one being wronged." Tears spilled over again, but this time they weren't only from pain. The nurse let out a harsh laugh. "You have no idea what you're talking about," she said. "These people always exaggerate to get attention." The man's eyes hardened instantly. "These people?" he repeated softly. The room went still. He took a step closer to the nurse. "Say that again," he said, slowly. The nurse shifted uncomfortably but held her ground. "Sir, you're interfering with hospital operations. You don't even know who I am." The man nodded. "That's true," he said, "but you might want to consider that you don't know who I am either." A few people exchanged glances. The nurse rolled her eyes. "Another hero," she muttered. "If you're not staff, move along." The man didn't raise his voice, didn't threaten, didn't insult. Instead, he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his phone. He tapped the screen once, then looked at the nurse. "Call a doctor," he said. "Now," the nurse laughed sharply. "Or what?" The man met her gaze steadily. "Or I will," he replied, "and I promise you won't like how fast this escalates." Aaliyah's hands trembled as she held Keisha's. Keisha stirred faintly. The man noticed instantly. "She's getting worse," he said. "If anything happens to her because of this delay, every second will be accounted for." The nurse scoffed again, but there was something different now, uncertainty. "You can't threaten me," she said. "I'm not threatening you," the man replied calmly. "I'm stating facts." He turned slightly, addressing the room. "Is there a physician in this lobby willing to take responsibility for ignoring a patient in respiratory distress?" Silence, thick, uncomfortable. Finally, a younger nurse near the hallway shifted. She should be triaged," she said quietly. The older nurse shot her a glare. The man nodded once. "Correct." He looked back at Aaliyah. "Stay with her," he said gently. "Help is coming." Aaliyah could barely speak. "Thank you," she whispered. The nurse slammed a file down on the counter. "This is ridiculous," she snapped. "You don't get to walk in here and act like you own the place." The man's eyes lifted slowly to meet hers, and for the first time since he spoke, there was no softness left in his gaze. "Be very careful," he said quietly. The nurse crossed her arms. "Or what?" she challenged. The man straightened fully now, his voice carried, still calm but unmistakably final. "Or you're about to learn exactly who does." The lobby fell into stunned silence, and somewhere deep in Aaliyah's chest, hope finally ignited. The nurse laughed. It was sharp, defensive, too loud for a room that had gone completely still. "You," she scoffed. "You own this place." A few nervous chuckles came from the crowd. But the man didn't react. He simply slipped his phone back into his pocket and looked around the lobby, slowly, deliberately taking in the faces, the raised phones, the staff frozen mid-step. Then he spoke. "I didn't say I own this hospital," he said calmly. The nurse smirked. "Good, because you don't." The man tilted his head slightly. "I said you're about to learn who does." The smirk vanished. He turned toward the front desk terminal and glanced at the name plaque mounted just below the counter. "St. Mercy Medical Center," he read aloud. "Founded in 1998, expanded twice, trauma wing added in 2015. The nurse's brow furrowed. The man continued, his voice steady, almost conversational. "Those expansions," he said, "were funded by a private endowment, largest single donation in the hospital's history." A hush fell over the room. Aaliyah felt her heart pounding, not with fear now, but with something electric. She clutched Keisha's hand tighter. The nurse crossed her arms again, but her confidence was cracking. "And," she snapped, "that doesn't make you special." The man nodded once. "No," he agreed, "it doesn't." Then he reached into his jacket again, this time pulling out a slim black wallet. He opened it and held it up. Inside was an ID card, gold embossed, official, undeniable. The nurse leaned forward instinctively, her face drained of color. The man turned the ID outward so the room could see. "Daniel Whitmore," he said clearly. "Chairman of the Whitmore Health Foundation." A collective gasp swept through the lobby. Phones dropped, mouths fell open. A doctor near the hallway froze mid-step. Someone whispered, "No way." The nurse staggered back half a step. That's not," she stammered. Daniel Whitmore continued calmly. "The Whitmore Health Foundation donated $87 million to this hospital," he said, "including the emergency wing, including the respiratory unit." He gestured subtly toward the ceiling. "And including the nurses' salaries." The silence was deafening now. The nurse's mouth opened, closed, opened again. I didn't know," she began. "No," Daniel said quietly. "You didn't care." Her hands began to shake. Aaliyah stared at him in disbelief, tears streaming freely now, but these tears were different. This wasn't humiliation. This was vindication. Daniel turned to the crowd. "You all saw what happened here," he said. "A young woman begging for help, a patient in respiratory distress, and a professional choosing prejudice over protocol." His eyes returned to the nurse. "You dismissed her because she was poor," he said, "because she was black, because you assumed her life and her sisters were worth less." The nurse shook her head frantically. "That's not true. I follow policy." "No," Daniel interrupted. "You violated it." He turned slightly and spoke into the open space. "Dr. Harris," he called out. A middle-aged physician stepped forward slowly, face pale. "Yes, Mr. Whitmore," he said. "Is it hospital policy," Daniel asked, "to deny emergency care to a patient in visible respiratory distress?" Dr. Harris swallowed. "No, sir." "Is it policy," Daniel continued, "to threaten removal instead of triage?" "No, sir." Daniel nodded. "Then this is not a misunderstanding," he said. "This is negligence." The nurse's knees buckled slightly. Security stepped closer now, but not toward Aaliyah, toward the nurse. Daniel turned back to Aaliyah. Her face crumpled as their eyes met. "I'm so sorry," he said gently. "This should never have happened." Aaliyah tried to speak, but the words wouldn't come. She just shook her head, sobbing silently. Daniel crouched beside Keisha again. "Get respiratory here now," he said sharply. "Oxygen nebulizer immediate transport." This time, no one hesitated. A team rushed forward. Oxygen mask, monitors, a gurney. The room exploded into motion. As Keisha was lifted carefully, her chest rising more fully with the first rush of oxygen, Aaliyah clutched her hand and cried openly. "She's going to be okay," Daniel said firmly. "I promise you." The nurse stood frozen, tears streaming down her face now. "I didn't know," she whispered. "If I had known who you were." Daniel turned slowly, his voice dropped. "And that," he said, "is exactly the problem." The words hit harder than a shout ever could. Security placed a hand on the nurse's arm. "Ma'am," one of them said quietly, "we need you to come with us." The nurse didn't resist. She couldn't. As she was led away, the crowd parted silently. Phones no longer recording, heads bowed. Daniel stood and addressed the room one last time. Let this be clear, he said. Care is not a privilege, it is a responsibility. He turned back to Aaliyah. And today, he added softly, you were seen. As the gurney rolled toward the emergency wing, Aaliyah followed, her legs shaking, her heart overwhelmed. For the first time all day, she wasn't invisible. The emergency room doors slammed open, and for the first time since dawn, help arrived without conditions. Doctors moved fast, voices sharp, focused, professional. Respiratory rate is critical. Oxygen saturation at 82. Prepare the nebulizer now. Aaliyah stood frozen just inside the doorway, her hand still gripping the side of the gurney as Keisha was transferred onto the hospital bed. Tubes, wires, and machines surrounded her sister in seconds. She felt useless, small, terrified. Daniel Whitmore placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. Stay right here, he said calmly. You don't need to move. Aaliyah nodded numbly, tears sliding down her cheeks as she watched a doctor fit the oxygen mask over Keisha's face. The sound of pressurized air filled the room. Keisha coughed once, then again, and then, finally, her chest rose more fully than it had all day. Aaliyah let out a sob so deep it felt like it came from her bones. She's responding, the doctor said. Good, very good. Aaliyah collapsed into the nearest chair, covering her mouth with both hands as relief crashed over her in waves. Her entire body shook. Daniel stayed where he was, didn't rush her, didn't speak. He simply waited. Several minutes passed before the doctor turned back to them. She's stable for now, he said. We'll monitor her closely, but you brought her in just in time. Aaliyah's head snapped up. Just in time, she echoed. The doctor met her eyes, his expression grave. Another delay could have been catastrophic. Aaliyah looked away, fresh tears spilling. Daniel inhaled slowly. Thank you, he said to the doctor. I'll be outside. Once they were in the hallway again, the full weight of what had happened came crashing down. Aaliyah stood there, staring at the floor, arms wrapped around herself like a shield. I'm sorry, she whispered suddenly. Daniel turned toward her. Sorry, he asked gently. I caused a scene, she said. I yelled, I begged, I embarrassed everyone. Daniel's brow furrowed. No, he said firmly. You did what a sister is supposed to do. You fought. Her lips trembled. They looked at me like I didn't belong there, she said. Like I was asking for something I didn't deserve. Daniel's expression hardened not at her, but at the memory. You deserved care the moment you walked in, he said. So did your sister. Footsteps approached. Dr. Harris returned, flanked by two administrators, faces tight, eyes avoiding Daniel's gaze. Mr. Whitmore, one of them began, we want to assure you this matter is being taken very seriously. Daniel nodded once. Good. The nurse involved has been placed on immediate administrative leave pending investigation, the administrator continued. Security footage, witness accounts, and policy violations are being reviewed. Aaliyah's breath caught. Administrative leave. Daniel's voice remained calm but unyielding. That's a start, he said, but not the end. The administrator swallowed. We will also be conducting mandatory bias training across staff, he added quickly. Effective immediately. Daniel looked at Aaliyah, then back at the administrator. Make sure of it, he said, because the next time this happens, I won't be standing in the lobby. The administrators nodded hastily and retreated. Silence settled again. This time it felt different, safer. Daniel turned fully toward Aaliyah. What's your name? He asked. Aaliyah, she said softly. Aaliyah Johnson. That's a strong name, he said. And you live nearby? Yes, she said. With my mother. Daniel nodded thoughtfully. I want you to focus on your sister right now, he said. Everything else I'll handle. Aaliyah hesitated. Sir, I don't. Daniel, he corrected gently. And this isn't charity. She looked confused. This hospital exists because someone once believed healthcare should not depend on a bank balance, he said. Today reminded me why that belief matters. He reached into his pocket and handed her a simple white card. On it was his direct number. If there are any problems, he said, you call me day or night. Her hands shook as she accepted it. I can't afford, she began. Daniel stopped her with a raised hand. Your sister's care is covered, he said. All of it past, present, future. Aaliyah stared at him, stunned. You don't have to. I know, he said, but I want to. Her knees nearly gave out. I don't know how to thank you, she whispered. Daniel smiled softly. Live, he said, that's enough. Later that evening, after Keisha had been moved to a private room and her breathing had fully stabilized, Daniel returned. This time he brought news that went beyond the hospital walls. I had my team look into your situation, he said gently, sitting across from Aaliyah. Your mother's medical needs, your work hours, your housing. Aaliyah's heart raced. We're not in danger of eviction, she said quickly. At least not yet. Daniel nodded. You won't be. He explained calmly, clearly, that her mother would receive proper treatment, that Keisha's medications would be permanently covered, that Aaliyah would no longer need to choose between rent and survival. Then he said something that made her breath stop. "There's also a scholarship," he added, "if you want it. For me." She asked, "You have leadership written all over you," he said. "Have you ever thought about healthcare advocacy, social work?" Aaliyah laughed weakly through tears. "I barely finished community college." "So did I," Daniel replied, before someone opened a door. The room felt warm, hope-filled. For the first time in years, the future didn't feel like a threat. It felt like a promise. Aaliyah reached for Keisha's hand and squeezed it gently. "We're going to be okay," she whispered. And this time, she believed it. 5 years later, the hospital lobby looked different to Aaliyah Johnson. Not because the walls had changed or the floors had been replaced, but because she had. Sunlight poured through the glass atrium as Aaliyah walked confidently across the polished floor, her posture relaxed, her steps sure. A visitor badge rested against her blazer, stamped with the words Patient Advocacy Director, Guest Lecturer. She paused for a moment, letting the memory pass through her. This was the same building where she once knelt on the floor begging strangers to see her sister as human. Now staff members nodded respectfully as she passed. Some smiled, some recognized her. She stopped near the same nurses' station. New staff, new faces, new policies posted clearly on the wall. No patient will be denied emergency care. Bias is a violation. Aaliyah inhaled slowly. Keisha was waiting for her near the elevators, healthy, strong, laughing. At 22, Keisha stood tall in athletic clothes, a gym bag slung over her shoulder. She had just finished her shift as a physical therapy intern, top of her class, determined to help others breathe, walk, and heal just as she once had. "You ready?" Keisha asked, grinning. Aaliyah smiled back. "Always." Their mother waited outside in the car, healthier now, pain managed, spirit lighter. The small apartment they once lived in had been replaced by a modest but warm home filled with light, laughter, and peace. Life wasn't perfect, but it was no longer desperate. Later that afternoon, Aaliyah stood in front of a room filled with nursing students, hospital administrators, and young doctors. Her voice was calm, clear, steady. "I'm not here to talk about medicine," she said. "I'm here to talk about humanity." The room was silent. "I once walked into a hospital with nothing but fear and love for my sister," she continued. "And I was taught very publicly that compassion can be conditional." She paused. "But it shouldn't be." She told them the story, not with anger, but with honesty. She spoke of silence, of judgment, of how quickly dignity can be stripped away when people decide who deserves care. "And then," she said softly, "one person chose to see us." Daniel Whitmore sat quietly in the back of the room, older now, listening with pride but no need for recognition. "That choice," Aaliyah said, "didn't just save my sister's life, it changed mine." Applause filled the room, not loud, not performative, but deep and sincere. That evening, as the sun dipped below the skyline, Aaliyah stood on her porch, watching Keisha laugh with their mother in the yard. She thought about that morning years ago, the fear, the humiliation, the silence, and the moment it finally broke. She understood something now she hadn't then. Pain can shape you, but it doesn't have to define you. Before going inside, Aaliyah looked up at the sky and whispered a quiet thank you, not just for survival, but for purpose. Because today, she didn't just receive compassion, she gave it. And she would keep giving it, as long as her voice could be heard. Moral of the story: never judge a life by appearances, because dignity doesn't come from wealth, it comes from humanity. One act of compassion can rewrite an entire future. And silence in the face of injustice can be just as harmful as cruelty itself. If this story moved you, please like the video, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to the channel for more powerful, inspirational stories. Tell us in the comments, where are you watching from and what part of this story touched your heart the most? Thank you for listening.